I'm a woman that grew up in a home with very tainted roots, and I am part of the rejected in life. Many of us have been rejected by our family, friends, people around us that make us feel like we're not worth anything, but we are worth a lot. I was always hard on myself. I always beat myself up. I always saw myself as nothing. But little did I know, until recently, going through an awakening and the teachings through my husband, who went through an awakening, and he taught me how to decode and understand people. And yes, I've been going through an awakening now for about 11 months now. And I have had ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs. But my own ups and downs were mainly my fault. Because I never got to the root of my problem. I never saw my problems for what they really were. And a big part of it was I could never get over rejection. I was always rejected in life from childhood to an adult. But when I became an adult, I was the one that was rejecting against myself. I was the one not giving myself a chance. I was the one not giving myself self-love. Which I've learned recently, what sin really is, it's not about 10 commandments. It's not about following a book. It's about how we turn our backs on ourselves. And we don't learn to love ourselves. And we don't give ourselves self-love. And we don't give ourselves gratification. And we don't see ourselves for the beauty within. All I saw was the ugliness. I had a very horrible past. A past that started as a young child that was created for me by trauma that occurred in the household I grew up in. But then I went on, and I kept on and kept on, traumatizing myself, putting myself in situations, doing destructive behavior, not thinking, not even seeing myself as a human being. Because again, all I saw myself was part of the rejected. Never knew love. I never knew empathy. I never even had a foundation set for me. A right foundation. It was always negativity. It was always abuse, physical, mental, everything you could possibly imagine has happened to me. So instead of understanding my life, seeing it for what it was, seeing why it happened, my part, their part, taking myself out of being a victim and not seeing myself as a survivor, I lived in my trauma. Trauma was my name. My name was not my name. My name was, hi, my name is Trauma. How are you? Let me tell you about my trauma. The first time I meet you. Let me give myself a self-pity party. Oh, poor pitiful me. I went through this. I was abused. I was this. I was that. I've had this happen to me. I had that happen to me. I never saw myself as a person. I only saw myself as trauma, which is part of the rejected. I never forgave myself. I never saw myself. I never even learned to love myself. How can I love anybody else? How can I understand anybody else? How can I be a friend to you? How can I be a mother to my children? How can I be a wife to my husband? How can I show any of them proper love if I don't even love myself? See, a sin, a true sin, is not loving yourself. Not loving yourself within or without. Because people that have trauma, we have to change that. And by doing that, we have to align our chakras the opposite way. Instead of root up to our crown, we have to start with our crown which leads down to our root. Because my roots have been a problem. They are a problem. They have been a problem. Through my awakening, my roots is the one thing that holds me back. It's the one thing that's caught me in that loop by not understanding my roots. By not understanding that my roots made me feel rejected because they were rejected by their parents and generation before that and generation before that and generation before that. And that's where the term nuclear family comes in. Majority of us come from a nuclear family, meaning that our family did not know how to raise us, did not know how to give us the right foundation, did not know how to lead us in the right direction, because they themselves were part of the rejected. And you have to understand, when somebody rejects you, it's because they don't love themselves. They never learned the proper foundation of love. They never learned how to care for themselves. They never learned anything about empathy. They only learned pain. So what they do is they put their pain on us. And they do not realize what they're doing, because they were rejected, and that rejected becomes a core within you, a root that grows and sprouts and spreads. And then you spread your feelings of hate from your rejection on others. If it's not your own children, if it's not your siblings, if it's not your friends, if it's not people at work, if it's not somebody that does you wrong in line at the coffee shop, we all do that, because that rejection lives inside of us and festers and takes control of our minds, which alters our souls. And then once our soul is altered, how do we get it back? How do we become renewed again? How do we understand why our souls got altered? Where they got altered? What part of our life did we lose ourselves? And why do we keep losing ourselves? And we never see that because we never look at the core of our problems. And we always live as one of the rejected. But it's time for us to do opposite. To understand why we're labeled as part of the rejected. Understand how we got that label for ourselves. Understand how our parents became part of the rejected, and their parents and parents before that. And understand why we live in nuclear families nowadays. Understand that we are our own worst enemies. Understand that after a while we start creating our own trauma for ourselves, our own self-doubt, our own feeling of no love, which leads us to no self-love. Understand why we are angry all the time. We are angry because, again, we never learned to forgive ourselves and forgive ourselves properly. It is very hard to forgive ourselves, because along the way, especially people that are our trauma becomes part of us, which our trauma becomes a habit. And a habit is anything that affects our personality, combined with our temperament and our trauma in certain situations in life. Then it becomes a habit, because we start living through it. And then your trauma becomes an addiction, because you're so addicted to the trauma that you don't even know that your life can be good. And when your life is going good, you make it bad, because you're so used to living in your trauma. Your trauma, again, becomes your identity, which became my identity. So when I had a good, happy day, I had to make it bad, so I could feel my pain, and I could feel my trauma, and I could have an excuse to tell people or make my husband feel bad or manipulate his mind that, no, you can't be happy because I'm not happy. Because, hi, my name is trauma again. My trauma defined me. I could not have a good day because I had to have some kind of trauma event, some kind of traumatic something, because that was my norm in life. That's how I grew up, and that's how I lived, was through my trauma. My trauma became my addiction. It became an addiction so bad that I only could identify myself again with my trauma. I had to learn to look at the better side of me. I had to separate myself from trauma and see myself for me. I had to get along with myself. Meaning, I had to learn myself. I had to understand myself. And then again, in the awakening, I thought, okay, I'm going to get a new soul. I'm going to get a new heart. Everything is going to be erased. But that's where I went wrong and manipulated myself to believe I was fully awakened. Because I didn't want to see myself for me and see myself as part of the rejected. And now I know being part of the rejected is not a bad thing. Because the ones that reject you, they reject themselves also. They are full of the pain that they filled you with. They are blind to see themselves as I was to see myself. They don't see anything good within them as I didn't see anything good within me. But now I am using my crown. Learning knowledge, learning to decode, learning to understand others, learning to see my situation as part of the rejected as not a bad thing, but as a beautiful thing. And now by me understanding, it is changing me to know that I am still the same person. And I do have my scars. And I do have my pain. But I am releasing all of that by forgiving myself, learning to love myself. But also, the biggest step that I failed in was learning to forgive those who rejected me and understand why they rejected me and understand why they made the choices that they made and understand why they did the things that they did to me and understand that everything they're doing to me, they're doing to themselves. They're hurting themselves because they're not hurting me any longer. And I will stop being insecure. And I will stop looking past myself in the mirror and start looking in the mirror at myself. And I will stop my addiction of being a trauma victim. I will stop using that and say, oh, you don't know me because this happened to me, that happened to me. I lived a traumatic life. No, I'm a survivor. And yes, I'm part of the rejected. And many of us are. But that is okay because that does not define us. That gives us strength. That gives us understanding. That gives us know-how to forgive others. And understand why they are too part of the rejected. And this has also given me the knowledge to be able to teach others to forgive themselves, to see themselves, to let them know that their past does not define who they are.